in this SDL tutorial series. So in this video we're going to be creating a window, as I said in the last tutorial. Now if you want the source code for this project, you can find it on my GitHub page. As always, I will be leaving this in the description box below. And a quick note, thank you for 100 subscribers, like wow. And look at our video, it's only been 3 weeks and 1,000 views, so that's a lot. So let's get into this tutorial. So the thing I haven't mentioned in the last video was the Github ignore file. Now if you're using GitHub, this is cool, but if you're not, then follow along. Now you usually don't want your lib folder in your project and your SDL folder in your project, and you don't want exes in your GitHub and DLLs in your GitHub because they take up a lot of space on your PC. Now if you don't use GitHub, by the way, you can skip to the timestamp in the description box below. So usually for GitHub you'll have 500 megabytes of space for each repository, and unless you're pro, which I am not, so if you're a pro member, then that's cool, you can add whatever you want. But if you're not a pro member, I recommend git ignores. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the tutorial. Now we're back at the same thing as before. Now we're not going to be working in the main.cpp now. We're going to be creating a new file called game.cpp. Now this is where most of our game logic will be run and executed, as you don't want most of your code in your main, because this should be the smallest file in your entire project. This will grow exponentially when your project grows. It's not recommended to make your entire game in your main.cpp file. So we're going to do that entirely in game.cpp. Now we're also going to be needing a header file, so go into your headers folder and create a new file and call it game.h or hpp. Now I just go with h. If you're not familiar with header files, I recommend checking out the Cherno's tutorial series on C++. We're going to be instancing a lot of things in this game.h file. So we're going to first include iostream. Now if you are not familiar, in header files you always want to start out with pragma once. Now this is important because it avoids duplicate includes. Next we're going to include SDL, so we're going to go into our SDL2 folder and get SDL.h. Now all the functions for SDL will be in this file. Now for rendering images, as I said in the last video, we have installed SDL image, so we can just say SDL image. And for now, these are the main things that we'll be including for this thing. Now we're going to be using object-oriented programming, which is basically classes and objects. So we're going to create a class, and I'm going to call it game. So there we go, we have our class made. Now in our class, we need a public and private. Now what these public and private parameters do in our code is the public, we can access it in any file, but for the private it's only available for the game.cpp and the game.h. So for public we want a few things. The first one would be void run. Now void run is just going to be able to run stuff. So we're going to be using this function to run our game. We're not going to use it for anything else. Next we need our constructor and deconstructor. These are important to instantiate in anywhere. So we're going to be instantiating our game in our main.cpp file. Alright, so I'm going to get some space to make this look nice. Okay, that looks good. Now in our private variables, we need to think wisely, because we want a few variables that can only be run in the private stuff. So we don't want them to go outside the game class. So first of all, we need an init function, and this will be able to initialize basically all our modules or stuff like SDL and other modules which we might be installing in the future, so this is important. Next we're going to need a game loop, and this game loop will be able to do stuff like handle events. So we need a handle events function which will be able to handle events. So that's that. Next, we're going to be needing a window. So SDL window, and this is a pointer as we are referencing to the SDL window, and we're going to create a window. Now this is, we haven't created the window yet, but this is just an instance of the window. And usually in my private stuff, I like to put an underscore in front of the variables. We're also going to want to have a renderer. Now a renderer is where we're going to render every image on the screen. So this is not important now, but it will be important later on in the future. So let's add that as well. Okay, so we're going to also need a window width and window height. We will be working on changing the window width and window height in UI later on. So for now, we're just going to keep this. So we're going to just call this int, as you're not allowed to add floats into your window size. So int screen width, and we're just going to put a random value. So I'm going to put 1024, and int screen height is going to be 600. And I'm going to add my underscores. Now that we have that done, we can go ahead and instance this in the game.cpp. So include our from the headers folder, that is, and the game.h. So let's go ahead and create just our game. So we're gonna keep that there, and I'm also going to instantiate the deconstructor. So let's go ahead and do our run method, and all this the run method will basically just be able to do this init and game loop. So this is what the run method will be doing. Next, let's go ahead and create our init method. Now I forgot to do something in the init function, and that is to add parameters. Now this is optional, but I feel like it's nice and neat for myself, so I like to add parameters for our window. So we're going to create a const car, and that's going to be our title. Next we're going to add an x and an int y, and this is basically the position of the window and where we'll be placing it on the computer. Then int w and int height, which will be the width and height of the window, and int 32 flags. Now flags are basically like if you want the window to be full screen, or resizability. So that's that. Next, copy them over and paste them here. Okay, that's cool. Now that we're done with this, we can go ahead and work on initializing everything. So let's go ahead and init everything. So SDL init everything. So we want to initialize everything for now, basically every single function which SDL provides us with, and that's that. Next, let's go ahead and create the window. So underscore window equals SDL create window. This is super straightforward, and we're just going to be passing in all the parameters. So title x, y, w, h, flags. Initially we want to set the window parameter to null, so in our constructor we'll just set that to null. So underscore window equals null ptr, or null pointer. So yeah, we're also going to set our other variables to null pointers as well, so our renderer to a null pointer by default. And then we're also going to create our screen width, and usually you don't want to set your values here, so I did a mistake there. You can just remove those, and we can set the values here. So 1024, and screen height to 600. Now let's go ahead and go into the init function and put in these flags, because if we don't put anything in, we're going to get an error. So let's go ahead and put the title. I'm just going to make the title say game, and then the X position is going to be SDL window pose centered. Now what this is just put it in the center, So the X position, which is this way, will be in the center. So that's only the X axis. We need to do the Y axis. Next, the width and height. We already have a width and height, so and for flags, we're just going to be saying SDL window shown. So, and then we're just going to show the window. So pretty straightforward. Next, let's create the renderer. So renderer equals SDL create renderer, and this is just gonna need the window and -1 0. So these are the flags. It requires 3 parameters: a window, we have passed our window, an index, usually you would like to put that, you should put that as -1, and flags. Now we currently have 0 flags. Next, let's go ahead and create a game loop. So all this will run is basically our handle events function. Now we're not done yet. We have to first of all handle events. So in here we're going to create an event. So SDL event event. Next we're going to create a poll event, and this will allow us to check for events. So event, and we're just going to put event, and obviously we're going to have to reference. Now we're going to check for individual events. For example, if we click this close button, then the window will close. event.type, so the type of event, and we're going to check for the case, and if the case is SDL quit, then we're going to quit. So for now we're just going to write break because we don't have a quitting method. So we're going to be creating another class. So we're going to set just get 2 things, play and exit. Now we're going to create a private variable for this, so I'm going to call it, there we go. Now we're going to set a default value. So right now, as default, we are setting the game state to play, so it will be running. But when we click the X button right here, we don't want the window to be running, so we will set game state to exit. That is game state exit. Perfection. Now that's cool, but the game or our code doesn't know when our window or our game loop is in exit mode. So we're going to have to code that in our game loop. So what we're doing here right now is we're checking if the game state is not equal to game exit. So if our game is currently playing, then we want to handle events. And I think we're done here for the game class right now.
Our headers slash game. Now let's go ahead and instance it. So game, yeah, game.run. And that's it. And then we're also going to return 0.
And do we have any errors? Yep, we got a lot. Oh my gosh. Enum has to come first, different class, so enum. This is not required. So this is actually supposed to be argc. Actually no, this is supposed to be argc. This is supposed to be argv, so my mistake there. Okay, so let's rerun this and see if we got any errors. Alright, so we got no errors. That means everything should work. So let me run the exe file. And there we go. We see a window here which says game up here. And if I were to close it, it closes. And that's basically what we were aiming to do. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. If you have any doubts or questions, please do post them in the comments section below. I do have a Discord now, so if you're interested, you can check us out at Scoop Games. I'll leave a link in the description box below. And so thank you so much for watching this very long tutorial, and I'll see you in the next